Lonely Korean mafia boss can't get a table on New Year's Eve. Then a black woman stand up and wave New Year's Eve, the most exclusive gala in Manhattan. And Ji-ho Park, Korean mafia boss, the man who made entire neighborhoods hold their breath, was being told there was no table for him. "I'm sorry, sir, your reservation was canceled." Around him, champagne glasses clinked. Designer gowns swept past marble floors. Couples embraced. Families laughed. Everyone had somewhere to belong, someone to hold. He turned toward the exit when a movement stopped him cold. An older black woman in a deep red dress rose from a corner table near the side wall. Beside her, a little girl with braided hair looked up, curious and unafraid. The woman met Ji-ho's gaze and waved him over. "Sir, you can sit with us." A stranger. Inviting the most dangerous man in the room to stay. 3 hours earlier, Ji-ho Park had dismissed his entire security detail, Dong-yoon, Gyung-ho, all of them, for the first time in 5 years. He had closed deals worth millions without flinching. His name silenced rooms across 3 boroughs. Nightclub owners in Queens, developers in Jersey, politicians in Albany, they all knew what happened when Ji-ho said no. Now he stood in the lobby of the Armitage Ballroom, Manhattan's most coveted venue, being told that none of that mattered. "Perhaps you didn't hear me," Ji-ho said, keeping his voice controlled. "Check again." Jung-ho, the maitre d', checked, twice, then lowered his tablet like it held bad news he didn't want to deliver. "The reservation under your name was canceled this afternoon. I'm very sorry, sir." Ji-ho felt the words land like a blow. Canceled. Not a mistake. Not an oversight. Deliberate. He knew what tonight was. The Desta Foundation Gala. Invitation only. Closed circle. The kind of event where Manhattan's elite gathered behind closed doors and smiled for photographers while making deals that would never see daylight. Hyejin had arranged his invitation. Hyejin, who ran the foundation's donor circles, who kept his money clean and his access open. She had wanted to meet tonight, and now he was being shut out. Around him, the ballroom doors opened, spilling warmth and laughter into the marble lobby. A jazz band tuned up somewhere inside, the bass thrumming through the floor like a heartbeat he couldn't match. Guests drifted past in glittering gowns and tailored suits, greeting each other with embraces that said, "We made it another year." Ji-ho had made it too. But there was no one waiting to embrace him. He stared past Jung-ho's shoulder at a table near the center of the room. White linen, crystal glasses, and a small place card bearing his name, flipped face down like a secret someone wanted buried. The realization settled cold in his chest. Someone had erased him on purpose, not with violence, not with threats, with silence. "I see," Ji-ho said. His reflection stared back from the polished marble walls. Perfect tuxedo, slicked hair, red-rimmed eyes he couldn't hide, the posture of a man who commanded respect but stood utterly alone. "Thank you for your time." He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps measured and precise despite the tremor in his hands. Around him, life hummed with warmth, couples holding hands across candlelit tables, children laughing, friends raising glasses in anticipation of midnight. He was surrounded by celebration, yet utterly isolated. The thought surfaced unbidden. New Year's Eve marked 1 year since Min-jae died, his younger brother. The accident that never sat right. The closed case that opened fresh wounds every time Ji-ho tried to move forward. He had come tonight thinking maybe, just maybe, he could be someone other than what the city made him. A mistake. Because when he reached the door, he allowed himself one final glance back. That was when he saw her. Naomi Brooks had not planned to wave at anyone tonight. She worked these events for extra income, coat check, table service, whatever paid. At 63, with arthritis in her knees and a granddaughter to raise alone, glamorous Manhattan galas meant overtime, not celebration. But Amina had been so excited when Naomi mentioned working the Desta Foundation event. "Can I come, Grandma? Please? I'll be good. I promise." How could she say no? So here they were, tucked at a small side table the staff had let them use during Naomi's break. Amina wore her favorite purple dress with silver stars, the one she saved for special occasions. In her lap, she held the drawing she'd made that afternoon. 3 stick figures holding hands. Grandma, look, Amina said, tugging Naomi's sleeve. That man is sad. Naomi followed her granddaughter's gaze. Near the entrance, a man in a black tuxedo was speaking with Jung-ho. Even from a distance, she could read the tension in his shoulders, the careful control in his expression. She didn't recognize him as anyone famous. She just saw what Amina saw, someone trying very hard not to break. Maybe he's just tired, baby. Amina shook her head, braids swinging. No, Grandma, he's sad like the kind of sad where you smile, but your eyes don't. Naomi watched the man turn and walk toward the door. His posture was perfect, his stride measured. But Amina was right. There was something hollow in the way he moved, something familiar. Naomi knew that walk. She'd perfected it herself after her daughter died, leaving Amina in her care, the appearance of composure when everything inside was crumbling. He doesn't have anyone, Amina said softly. Nobody's waiting for him. The words landed heavy in Naomi's chest. She looked at the empty chairs around their small table, then back at the man retreating toward the cold Manhattan night. Her late husband used to say, "Some people need saving, Naomi, and sometimes you're the only one who sees it." Before she could overthink it, Naomi stood up. Jiho's hand was on the door when he heard it, a voice cutting through the ambient noise, clear and unafraid. "Sir, you. Yes, you in the tux." He turned. The older black woman in the red dress was on her feet, waving at him. The little girl beside her stood on her chair to be seen above the crowd, one small hand raised in a mirror of her grandmother's gesture. Jung-ho looked mortified. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I can ask them to—" "No," Jiho heard himself say. "It's fine." He didn't know why he said it. Every instinct told him to decline and leave. He was Jiho Park. He did not accept charity from strangers. He did not sit at other people's tables like some lost soul in need of rescue. But the little girl was still smiling at him, and the woman, her grandmother clearly, had an expression that held no pity, no fear, no recognition of who Jiho was or what he controlled. Just a quiet steadiness, as if she understood something about him that he hadn't said aloud. He walked toward their table. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. Even the jazz band seemed to pause. "We got an empty seat right here," Naomi said, pulling out the chair herself. "Sit, before you change your mind." "I'm Amina," the little girl announced proudly. "And that's my grandma Naomi." Jiho stared at the offered chair. He could still leave. He could thank them politely, make an excuse, and walk out into the night where no one would see his vulnerability. He could return to his car, to the empire waiting for him, and pretend this evening never happened. Or he could sit down. He thought of the phone call he'd ignored that morning. He thought of Minjae's grave, unvisited. He thought of every New Year's Eve for the past decade spent surrounded by soldiers who called him boss, but never asked if he was okay. He sat down. "Thank you," he said. The words felt strange in his mouth. When was the last time he had thanked someone and truly meant it? Amina beamed. Naomi nodded, then signaled a flustered waiter. "Bring him a menu," she said, matter of fact, like she seated MAFIA bosses at her table every night. And just like that, Jiho Park, who commanded empires and silenced rooms with a glance, found himself at a tiny side table with a grandmother and her 7-year-old granddaughter. No agenda, no power, no role to play. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he had no idea what came next. But across the ballroom, near the donor section, Hyejin had noticed. And her expression wasn't surprise, it was calculation. To understand how Jiho Park ended up at that table, and why sitting down would become the most dangerous decision of his life, you have to go back 3 hours earlier, to the moment he made a choice that would change everything. Hello, my friends and loved ones. Thanks for joining me on this beautiful story. As we continue this story, kindly take a moment to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and I love to always hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it at your end right now? Thank you for subscribing. 3 hours earlier, Jiho had stood in his penthouse overlooking the Hudson, staring at his phone. Donghyun's name flashed on the screen, his head of security calling for the 3rd time that evening. Jiho let it ring out. "Boss, you need us tonight," Donghyun had said earlier, voice tight with concern. "The Desta Foundation Gala isn't neutral ground. Hyejin's people will be there. Seung-hoon's crew. You can't walk in alone. But Ji-ho had made up his mind. One night, he'd said, I need one night where nobody calls me boss. Dong-yeon had gone quiet. Then, Sir, it's been a year since... I know what day it is. The line had gone dead. Now, sitting at Naomi's table with a menu he hadn't asked for and a little girl studying him like a puzzle she wanted to solve, Ji-ho realized how foolish that decision had been. Not because of danger, because of this warmth he didn't know how to hold. Naomi leaned back in her chair, eyes steady on his face. She didn't ask for his name, didn't ask what he did for a living, or why a man in a $10,000 tuxedo had nowhere to sit. She asked something else entirely. You okay? The question landed soft but precise, like she'd aimed for the exact spot he kept protected. Ji-ho opened his mouth, closed it. I'm fine. No, you're not, Naomi said, matter of fact. No judgment, just truth. Amina nodded seriously, elbows on the table. Your face is loud. Ji-ho blinked. What? Your face, Amina repeated, tilting her head. It's trying to be quiet, but it's loud. Like when Grandma says she's fine, but she's crying in the kitchen. Amina, Naomi started. It's true, Grandma. Ji-ho felt something crack open in his chest, a laugh that came out as a breath. My face is loud? Really loud, Amina confirmed. Then, without warning, are fireworks too loud for your heart? The question hung in the air like smoke. Ji-ho stared at this child who just reached into him and pulled out something he didn't know how to name. I don't know. That's okay, Amina said, satisfied. Grandma doesn't know lots of things, too. Naomi smiled. Thank you, baby. A waiter arrived with Ji-ho's menu. Naomi ordered Amina to sit properly, which Amina ignored. The moment should have felt awkward, forced, but it didn't. It felt ordinary. Naomi told Amina not to speak with her mouth full. Amina asked Ji-ho if he liked shrimp or if it made his stomach scared. Ji-ho said shrimp was fine, and it was the most honest conversation he'd had all week. Naomi didn't pry. She didn't call him sir or lean in with calculated interest. Instead, she talked about small things. How she used to sing in a church choir before her voice got tired. How she worked events like this for extra income. How rich people smiled too much when they were afraid of silence. Ji-ho listened like he was starving. He watched Naomi wipe sauce from Amina's chin with a napkin. Watched Amina squeeze her grandmother's hand when the jazz band played a song she liked. Watched them exist together with the kind of ease that came from love, worn smooth by time. And he felt it, the pull, not desire, not strategy, longing for something this simple, this unguarded, this real. What do you miss most? Naomi asked suddenly, cutting through his thoughts. Ji-ho looked up. What? When you close your eyes at night, Naomi said, voice gentle. What's the thing you miss most? No one had ever asked him that. Ji-ho's throat tightened. He thought of Min-jae laughing over bad coffee, thought of mornings before power corrupted everything, thought of the version of himself who still believed he could be good. My brother, Ji-ho said quietly. I miss my brother. Naomi didn't ask what happened. She just nodded, like she understood that some losses didn't need explanation. Amina reached across the table and patted Ji-ho's hand. It's okay to miss people, she said. Grandma says they're still with us. Just quieter. Ji-ho stared at this child's small hand on his, the hand that had signed death warrants, that had built an empire on fear, and felt his vision blur. This was dangerous, not because of enemies watching, not because of power games or territory wars, because warmth felt like stepping into a life he didn't deserve. A life he'd burned down years ago to build something colder, sharper, untouchable. Across the ballroom, near the donor section, movement caught Ji-ho's peripheral vision. Hyejin stood beside a tall man in a tailored gray suit, Seung-hoon, her right hand, the one who handled problems quietly. They were both looking at Naomi's table. Hyejin raised her champagne glass in a toast that didn't reach her eyes. Seung-hoon smiled. Then he started walking toward them. Ji-ho's spine went rigid. Every instinct screamed danger, but there was nowhere to move without making a scene. No security to signal, no exit strategy. Just Naomi, wiping Amina's hands with a napkin, completely unaware that trouble was crossing the ballroom floor in an expensive suit. Sheng-hoon arrived at their table exactly as the band finished a song, and the sudden silence felt deliberate. "Ji-hyo," Sheng-hoon said, voice smooth as glass. "What a pleasant surprise." He extended his hand, too polite to refuse, too calculated to be harmless. Ji-ho stood slowly, keeping his body between Sheng-hoon and Naomi's chair. Sung-hoon. "I didn't expect to see you here," Sung-hoon continued, eyes sliding past Ji-ho to land on Naomi and Amina. "Especially not at this table." The emphasis was delicate, pointed. Naomi looked up, sensing the shift in temperature, and Ji-ho knew, with cold, absolute certainty, that sitting down had just painted a target on the only warmth he'd felt in a year. Sheng-hoon didn't sit. He didn't need to. He occupied space the way predators did, present without permission, invasive without touching. "A misunderstanding, really," Sung-hoon said, his smile polished to a shine. "Your reservation. Jung-ho mentioned there was some confusion with the system." Ji-ho's jaw tightened. "Is that what he mentioned?" "These things happen at high-capacity events." Sung-hoon's gaze drifted to Naomi, then Amina, with the clinical assessment of someone cataloging details for later use. "Though I see you've found alternative arrangements." The pause before alternative carried weight. Naomi set down her fork slowly, her posture shifting, not aggressive, but alert. She'd spent 63 years reading rooms, and this man in the expensive suit wasn't here to wish anyone well. "We're just having dinner," Naomi said evenly. "Of course." Shung-hoon's smile widened. "How generous of you." Ji-ho felt the insult land, not on him, but on Naomi, the implication that her kindness was charity to someone above her station. That she'd overstepped. "Sung-hoon," Ji-ho said, voice dropping to the register his soldiers recognized as a warning. "Was there something you needed?" "Only to extend Hyejin's regards." Sung-hoon gestured toward the donor section where Hyejin stood, champagne in hand, watching their exchange with the patience of someone who'd already won. "She was hoping to discuss the Foundation's new initiatives with you tonight. She arranged your invitation specifically for that conversation." Arranged. The word clicked into place like a key turning. Ji-ho understood now. This wasn't about a table. It was about control. Hyejin ran the donor circles that kept Ji-ho's money clean, the legitimate channels that gave him access to rooms like this, to politicians, to influence that couldn't be bought with cash alone. She was his bridge to respectability. And bridges could be burned. The canceled reservation wasn't a mistake. It was a test. A public destabilization designed to remind Ji-ho who held the keys to the doors he needed open. Hyejin had expected him to come alone, to be denied entry, to seek her out. Grateful, compliant, aware of his place in her ecosystem. Naomi's wave had disrupted the plan entirely. "Tell Hyejin I appreciate her concern," Ji-ho said carefully. "But as you can see, I'm occupied." Sung-hoon's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Of course. Though I should mention, the Foundation takes its guest list very seriously. We wouldn't want any complications." "What kind of complications?" Naomi asked, her voice steady despite the tension crackling through the air. Shung-hoon turned to her with theatrical politeness. "Oh, nothing alarming, ma'am. Simply that certain guests have security clearances, background requirements. The Foundation serves vulnerable communities, children's programs, outreach initiatives. We have to be cautious about who's present at our events." The implication was surgical. Your presence here could become a problem. Amina looked up from her plate, eyes moving between Seung-hoon and her grandmother. "Why are you smiling with your eyes turned off?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Seung-hoon's smile faltered for half a second. "Excuse me?" "Your mouth is smiling," Amina said, matter of fact, "but your eyes aren't. Grandma says people do that when they're being mean on purpose." "Amina," Naomi started, but there was no disapproval in her voice, only caution. Ji-ho felt something sharp and protective flare in his chest. He stepped closer to Shung-hoon, close enough that only the two of them could hear. You've delivered your message, Ji-ho said quietly. Now walk away. Seung-hoon held his gaze for a long moment, weighing options. Then he stepped back, smile returning to full brightness. Enjoy your evening, Seung-hoon said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. All of you. He walked back toward Hyejin, and Ji-ho watched him lean in, whispering something that made Hyejin's expression sharpen with interest. Across the ballroom, Jung-ho was suddenly very busy checking his tablet, avoiding Ji-ho's line of sight with the guilty efficiency of someone who'd been paid to look the other way. The pieces assembled themselves with brutal clarity. Hyejin had arranged the invitation. Hyejin had orchestrated the cancellation. Jung-ho had been instructed to turn Ji-ho away, not to punish him, but to position him, to make him need her. And now, because Naomi had offered him a chair, because Ji-ho had chosen warmth over strategy, Hyejin was recalculating. Naomi's table was no longer invisible. It was a target. Friend of yours? Naomi asked, watching Seung-hoon rejoin Hyejin. Business associate, Ji-ho said. He threatened us. Naomi's voice was calm, but her hand had moved to rest on Amina's shoulder, protective, instinctive. Ji-ho met her eyes. She wasn't asking for reassurance. She was stating fact, asking him to be honest. Yes, Ji-ho admitted. He did. Naomi studied him for a long moment. She could have asked him to leave, could have demanded to know what kind of man brings danger to a grandmother's table. Instead, she surprised him. You want to stay? Naomi asked. Ji-ho looked at Amina, who was drawing on her napkin with a crayon a waiter had given her, looked at the untouched meal, the half-finished conversation, the ordinary moment he'd interrupted with his presence. He should leave. Should walk out and handle Hyejin the way he handled all threats, with distance, calculation, controlled violence if necessary. But the thought of returning to the cold penthouse, to the empty car, to the life where nobody asked if he was okay. Yes, Ji-ho said. I want to stay. Naomi nodded once. Then you stay. But you're going to tell me the truth about what we just stepped into. Across the room, Hyejin raised her glass again. This time, it wasn't a toast. It was a declaration of war. Ji-ho waited until the waiter cleared their plates. Then he leaned forward, voice low and controlled. There's a private dining room on the 3rd floor, he said. Quieter, more comfortable. I can have you moved. No, Naomi said. It would be safer. I said no. Ji-ho blinked, caught off guard by the steel in her voice. You don't understand what's happening here. I understand perfectly. Naomi set her napkin down with deliberate calm. You're worried. That man scared you, so now you want to move us somewhere you can control. I'm not a package you move around. That's not... Ji-ho stopped, jaw tight. I'm trying to protect you. By hiding us? Naomi's eyes didn't waver. Or by hiding yourself? The question hit deeper than Ji-ho expected. He looked away, toward the ballroom's center where couples danced, where Hyejin still stood watching, where the illusion of safety depended on maintaining distance from anything real. His instincts screamed solutions. Relocate Naomi and Amina to neutral ground, assign security he trusted, remove all variables until the threat dissolved. He'd built an empire on controlling risk. But Naomi wasn't a business problem. She was a woman who'd offered him a chair, and now he was trying to shuffle her off the board like a piece that complicated his strategy. Look at me, Naomi said. Ji-ho met her gaze. Sometimes you don't fix people, Naomi continued. You stand with them. You think I haven't been threatened before? You think raising a black granddaughter in this city doesn't teach you how to hold your ground? This is different. Because you're involved? Naomi's voice softened, but the firmness remained. That makes it your problem, not ours to disappear from. Amina looked up from her drawing, sensing the tension. Are you fighting? No, baby, Naomi said. Yes, Ji-ho said at the same time. Amina's eyes widened. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Grandma fights with people she cares about. She doesn't waste words on people who don't matter. Ji-ho felt something shift in his chest, uncomfortable, unfamiliar. I'm not trying to dismiss you. Then stop treating us like we're fragile, Naomi said. We're not. Before Ji-ho could respond, movement caught his attention. Seung-hoon was returning, but this time he held his phone, screen angled just enough for Ji-ho to see. A photo. Recent. Taken from across the ballroom. Jiho, Naomi, and Amina at their table, mid-conversation. Intimate, unexpected, the kind of image that told a story. Sung-hoon stopped 3 feet away. Didn't sit, didn't need to. He simply tilted his phone so Jiho could see it clearly. Beautiful moment, Sung-hoon said pleasantly. The city would love this, don't you think? Manhattan's most feared. Opens his heart on New Year's Eve. Or perhaps his eyes slid to Naomi, mysterious woman and child breach inner circle. The press does love a narrative. Jiho's hands curled into fists beneath the table. Imagine, Sung-hoon continued, voice silk over razor wire. Your name in headlines. Her name in headlines. The foundation asking questions about unvetted guests at a children's charity event. Background checks, investigations, all very routine, of course. The threat was clear. Exposure would paint Naomi as suspicious, make Amina a liability, turn a moment of kindness into a scandal that damaged everyone it touched. Naomi's expression hardened, but she said nothing. Delete it, Jiho said quietly. I'm sorry? Sung-hoon's smile was poisonous. I don't think I heard you. Delete the photo. Sung-hoon laughed, a sound like breaking glass. This isn't your territory, Jiho. These aren't your rules. He pocketed his phone. But I'll tell you what. Come speak with Hyejin. 5 minutes of your time. We resolve our misunderstanding, and this, he gestured at Naomi's table, disappears from everyone's memory. I'm right here, Naomi said coldly. Stop talking around me like I'm furniture. Sung-hoon turned to her with theatrical courtesy. My apologies, ma'am. I'm simply trying to help everyone avoid unnecessary complications. Complications, Naomi repeated. That what you call threatening a child? I would never... Sung-hoon's expression shifted to wounded innocence. I'm protecting the Foundation's reputation. Surely you understand the importance of... Get away from this table, Jiho said, standing. Now. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Sung-hoon studied Jiho with the calculating patience of someone who'd already mapped every outcome. Then he stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender. 5 minutes, Sung-hoon said. That's all Hyejin asks. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. He walked away, and Jiho remained standing, mind racing through scenarios, through tactics, through every move that would keep Naomi and Amina out of crosshairs they didn't deserve. He turned to Naomi, decision made. I'm calling you a car, Jiho said. Black sedan, trusted driver. He'll take you and Amina home. Sit down, Naomi said. This isn't negotiable. I said sit. Jiho sat, thrown by the command in her voice. Naomi leaned forward, eyes blazing. You think I need your permission to leave? You think I'm staying because I'm too scared to go? She shook her head slowly. I'm staying because you need us here, because the second we leave, you're alone again, and whatever fight is coming... She glanced toward Hyejin. You can't win it if you're still pretending you don't need anyone. That's not... Jiho stopped, the words dying in his throat. Because she was right. He wasn't protecting them. He was protecting himself from the vulnerability of caring. I don't want you hurt, Jiho said quietly. Either of you. Then trust us, Naomi said. Trust that we can handle what comes. Trust that you don't have to carry everything alone. Amina reached across the table and took Jiho's hand again, small fingers wrapping around his with absolute confidence. It's okay to be scared, Amina said. Brave people get scared too. They just don't run away. Jiho stared at this child who saw through him with terrifying clarity. Across the ballroom, Hyejin was watching, waiting. And Jiho realized his protective instincts, honed over years of survival, had just pushed away the only people who'd seen him as human. His first mistake, but not, he feared, his last. Midnight came and went with champagne toasts and strangers kissing. The ballroom began its slow dissolution. Guests collecting coats, valets scrambling for cars, the illusion of celebration giving way to cold January air. Jiho stood near Naomi's table, phone in hand, Dong-hyun's number already dialed. I'm having my driver brought around, Jiho said. He'll take you both home, directly to your door, no stops. Naomi gathered Amina's drawings with deliberate slowness. I have a car. I'm sure you do, but... But what? Naomi looked up, exhaustion sharpening her features. But you don't trust me to get my granddaughter home safely? I've been doing that for 7 years without your help. Jiho's jaw tightened. That was before tonight. Before you, Naomi corrected. You mean before I made the mistake of waving at someone who brings problems with him? The words landed like a slap. Jiho deserved them. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm not trying to handle you. I'm trying to control the situation, Naomi finished. I know. I've met men like you before. Different uniforms, same instinct. Protect by owning. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it? Naomi stood, helping Amina into her coat. You've been treating me like a liability since that man showed you a photo. Like I'm something that needs to be managed, moved, hidden. Jiho wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because she was right. Again. He'd spent the last hour calculating exits, assigning blame to his own vulnerability, treating Naomi's kindness like a mistake that needed correcting. I don't worship danger, Naomi said, voice softening. I've buried a daughter, raised a grandchild alone, survived things that would have broken smaller people. So, when I tell you I'm not easily scared, believe me. I believe you, Jiho said, and he did. Naomi studied him for a long moment. Then, I'll accept your driver, but only if you stop acting like I'm powerless. I'm choosing to let you help. There's a difference. Jiho nodded, relief flooding through him. Thank you. Amina tugged on his sleeve, eyes serious in the way only children could manage. Who do you go home to? Jiho crouched to her level, the question hitting him like a physical blow. What? When you leave here, Amina said. Who's waiting for you? Jiho opened his mouth, closed it. Nobody. The answer was nobody. I live alone, Jiho managed. Amina's face crumpled with sadness. That's really lonely. Amina, that's not polite, Naomi started. It's okay, Jiho said, voice rough. She's right. It is lonely. Amina hugged him suddenly, fierce and unexpected. Jiho froze, then slowly wrapped his arms around this small person who'd looked at him and seen what everyone else missed. When Amina pulled back, she whispered, Maybe you can visit us sometime, so you're not alone. Jiho couldn't speak. He just nodded. Come on, baby, Naomi said gently. Let's get you home. As they moved toward the exit, Jiho felt a hand on his shoulder. Hyejin. Walk with me, she said. Not a request. Jiho glanced at Naomi's retreating back, then followed Hyejin to a quiet corner near the now empty donor section. Interesting evening, Hyejin said, champagne glass still in hand, though the bar had closed. What do you want? Hyejin? To remind you how this works. Hyejin's smile was professional, empty. I keep doors open for you. I make your money clean. I ensure you have access to rooms like this to people who matter. In return, you don't complicate my work with bad optics. Bad optics? Jiho repeated. That woman and her granddaughter, Hyejin said. Charming moment, truly. But people are asking questions. Who are they? Why were they here? Why were you sitting with unvetted guests at a foundation event focused on child welfare? Naomi did nothing wrong. Naomi. Hyejin tasted the name like spoiled wine. You know her first name after one dinner. How sweet. How reckless. Jiho's hands curled into fists. This was never about a table. No, Hyejin agreed. It was about reminding you where you stand. You're not one of them, Jiho. You never will be. You're useful because I make you acceptable, but that ends the moment you become a liability. And Naomi's kindness makes me a liability? Her presence does. Hyejin set down her glass with delicate finality. Sung-hoon took photos. By tomorrow, people will ask questions. Background checks will be run. And when they discover she's nobody, no connections, no influence, just a woman who works service jobs, the narrative becomes embarrassing. For who? Jiho asked coldly. For everyone. Hyejin stepped closer. This isn't love, Jiho. This is leverage. And the moment someone realizes you care about that woman and her granddaughter, they become weapons against you. Jiho felt ice settle in his stomach. Are you threatening them? I'm educating you. Hyejin's expression remained neutral. You built your empire on understanding power. Don't lose it over one moment of sentimentality. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Jiho, Sung-hoon found something. About your brother. About Min-jae. Jiho's world narrowed to a pinpoint. What about him? Hyejin pulled an envelope from her clutch. Cream-colored. Expensive. She placed it in Jiho's hand like a gift wrapped in poison. Min-jae's accident wasn't an accident, Hyejin said softly. It was a message. One you apparently didn't understand. She smiled. The donor game has rules. Your brother broke them. He was asking questions about Foundation money. Where it went, who controlled it. He thought he was protecting you. Jiho's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside, police reports, surveillance photos, financial records showing Min-jae's name alongside donor inquiries dated 2 weeks before his death. And a handwritten note in Min-jae's script. Jiho, something's wrong with the Desta Foundation. The money doesn't add up. I think Hyejin is... The note ended mid-sentence. Jiho looked up, vision blurring with rage. You killed him. I protected the Foundation, Hyejin corrected. Min-jae was collateral damage, just like that grandmother will be, if you don't remember where your loyalties lie. She walked away, heels clicking against marble. Jiho stood frozen, Min-jae's unfinished note clutched in his shaking hands. Naomi's wave, her simple, human kindness, had accidentally stepped into a war that had already cost him his brother, and now Hyejin had made it clear. Anyone Jiho cared about was already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Jiho made the call at 2 a.m., 3 hours after Hyejin had walked away with Min-jae's death confession wrapped in threats. Dong-yoon, I need surveillance on an address in Brooklyn, discreet, 24-hour rotation. Whose address, boss? Jiho gave him Naomi's building location, the one he'd obtained through channels he wasn't proud of using. Protection detail? Dong-yeon asked. Observation only. If anyone approaches, anyone connected to Hyejin, Sung-hoon, the Foundation, I want to know immediately. Understood. Jiho hung up and told himself he was doing the right thing, protecting them, keeping them safe, making sure Hyejin's threats stayed theoretical. He didn't tell himself the truth. That control felt safer than trust, that managing variables felt easier than accepting vulnerability. By morning, Dong-yeon had positioned 2 teams within visual range of Naomi's building. By afternoon, Jiho had reviewed their reports 3 times. Naomi left for work at 6:47 a.m., returned at 3:15 p.m. with Amina from school. No suspicious activity detected. It should have brought relief. Instead, it brought Naomi to his penthouse at 7 p.m., fury radiating from her like heat. She'd noticed the surveillance. Of course she had. How long? Naomi demanded, standing in his doorway with Amina behind her, the child's eyes wide and uncertain. Jiho's stomach dropped. How did you... The same black car parked across from my building for 12 hours. The man in the coffee shop who doesn't drink coffee? Naomi's voice was controlled, but barely. I've lived in this city long enough to recognize when I'm being watched. What I don't know is why. It's protection. Protection I didn't ask for. Naomi stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. You put men on my home without telling me, without asking permission, without considering that maybe, just maybe, I had a right to know. Hyejin threatened you, Jiho said, desperation creeping into his voice. After the gala, she made it clear that you and Amina are targets. I needed to make sure. You needed to control the situation, Naomi interrupted. You needed to manage me like I'm another piece on your chessboard. That's not... Yes, it is. Naomi's voice cracked slightly. You don't get to decide my freedom because you're afraid. You don't get to put surveillance on my family without my consent just because you think you know better. Amina tugged on Naomi's sleeve. Grandma, what's surveillance? It means Mr. Jiho had people watching our home, baby. Amina's face fell. Why? Did we do something bad? The question landed like a physical blow. No, Jiho said quickly, crouching to Amina's level. You didn't do anything bad. I was trying to keep you safe. By spying on us? Amina's voice was small, confused. That doesn't feel safe. That feels scary. Jiho felt his world tilting. He'd wanted to protect them, and instead he'd frightened them. He'd wanted to prevent harm, and instead he'd caused it. I'm sorry, Jiho said. I should have asked. I should have talked to you both first. Yes, Naomi said coldly. You should have. Jiho stood, trying to find words that would repair what he'd broken. Let me explain the threat. If you understood what Hyjin is capable of... I understand perfectly, Naomi said. I understand that you're so terrified of losing people that you'd rather cage them than trust them to make their own choices. I'm not trying to cage anyone. Then what do you call watching my home without permission? What do you call making decisions about my safety without including me in those decisions? Naomi's eyes blazed. Kindness with chains is not kindness, Jiho. It's control dressed up as care. The words hit harder than any of Hyejin's threats, because they were true. Jiho had treated Naomi exactly like he treated every other variable in his empire, something to manage, to position, to control until the threat passed. He'd forgotten she was a person, with agency, with dignity, with the right to choose her own level of risk. I'll pull the surveillance, Jiho said quietly. Immediately. That's not enough. Naomi's voice softened, but didn't relent. You broke trust, Jiho. You made a decision about my life without me. That's not partnership. That's ownership. I don't want to own you. Then stop acting like you do. Naomi reached for Amina's hand. We're leaving. Panic flooded Jiho's chest. Naomi, please, let me fix this. You can't fix it, Naomi said. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Because fixing it would require you to see me as an equal, not a problem to solve. And I don't think you know how to do that yet. She turned toward the door, Amina in tow. Wait, Jiho said desperately. At least let me explain the full threat. Let me show you what Hyejin is capable of, so you can make an informed decision. No. Naomi stopped at the door, but didn't turn around. Because that's still you trying to control the outcome. That's still you deciding what information I need to make the right choice, which means the choice you want me to make. I just want you safe. I want to be free, Naomi said, and right now, your version of safe looks a lot like a cage. She opened the door. Amina looked back at Jiho, confusion and hurt written across her small face. Are you still going to be our friend? Jiho couldn't answer. His throat had closed around words he didn't know how to say. Amina's face crumpled slightly. Your face is loud again, she whispered. Then they were gone. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like something breaking. Jiho stood in his empty penthouse, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking a city he'd spent years conquering, and felt more isolated than he'd ever felt in his life. He'd tried to protect them, and instead, he'd driven them away. He thought of Naomi's table, the small, imperfect warmth of it, the way Amina had squeezed his hand, the way Naomi had seen him without fear. All of it, gone. Because he'd treated connection like a problem to manage instead of a gift to honor. Jiho sank into a chair and stared at his phone. Dongyun's number ready to dial. Surveillance teams ready to pull. But pulling the teams wouldn't fix what he'd broken. Nothing would, except maybe learning to be someone different than the man who believed control equaled care. Jiho closed his eyes and saw Naomi's empty chair in his mind, the one she'd pulled out for him on New Year's Eve, the one she'd offered without transaction or condition. It was emptier now than his entire empire, and he had no one to blame but himself. His phone buzzed. A message from Hyejin. Heard you had visitors tonight. How unfortunate that didn't go well. Perhaps we should talk about your options. Jiho stared at the message. Then he did something he'd never done before when facing a threat from Hyejin. He didn't respond with strategy or counter-threats. He simply sat with the grief of what he'd lost, and understood finally that power couldn't protect him from the consequences of treating people like problems instead of partners. The city glittered below, indifferent to his pain, and somewhere in Brooklyn, Naomi was tucking Amina into bed, probably reassuring her that adults sometimes made mistakes. Jiho just hoped, desperately, uselessly, that this mistake wasn't permanent. Jiho spent the next 3 days trying to become the man he'd been before New Year's Eve. Boss, strategist, untouchable. He sat in his penthouse office overlooking the Hudson, reviewing territory reports with Donghyun and Gyungho. He approved shipments, authorized payments, made decisions that moved millions of dollars with a signature. His soldiers spoke in the clipped, deferential tones they always used. Yes, boss. Understood, boss. Right away, boss. The words felt hollow now, like echoes in an empty room. Jiho dismissed them early and sat alone in the silence, Min-jae's unfinished note still on his desk, where he'd placed it 3 nights ago. Jiho, something's wrong with the Desta Foundation. The money doesn't add up. I think Hyejin is... His brother had died trying to protect him. Died asking questions Jiho had been too comfortable to ask himself. Too dependent on Hyejin's clean money and open doors to see what Min-jae had seen clearly. The donor game was a trap dressed as legitimacy, and Jiho had walked into it willingly. He thought of the moment Min-jae's car had crashed, how quickly the case closed, how easily the accident narrative had been accepted. Jiho had grieved, yes, but he hadn't questioned, hadn't demanded answers. Because grief, he realized now, had been steering him like a hidden hand, keeping him numb, keeping him manageable. Hyejin thrived when he was isolated and controllable, when his power depended on her approval. When he had nothing, no one, that mattered more than access. New Year's Eve had threatened that carefully constructed isolation. Naomi had offered him something Hyejin couldn't manufacture, recognition without transaction, warmth without leverage, and Hyejin had reacted swiftly, brutally, showing Jiho exactly what happened to people he cared about. His phone buzzed. Hyejin's name flashed on the screen. Foundation board meeting. Friday. Your presence required. Let's discuss your future involvement. The subtext was clear. Fall in line or lose everything she'd given him. Jiho stared at the message for a long moment. Then he did something he'd never done before. He deleted it without responding. His fingers trembled as he opened a new message. Not to Hyejin, not to Seung-hoon, but to his accountant. Pull every dollar from Desta Foundation accounts. Effective immediately. No explanations. The response came within minutes. Sir, that will trigger audits. Questions. You'll lose access to. Do it. Jiho set down his phone and waited for the fear to arrive, the panic that came with losing control, with burning bridges, with walking away from the legitimacy he'd spent years building. The fear didn't come. Instead, he felt something stranger. Relief. He wasn't playing Hyejin's game anymore. Wasn't pretending power meant having the right people owe him favors. Wasn't measuring his worth by how many doors stayed open when he approached. The consequences would be brutal. He knew that. Hyejin would retaliate. The Foundation would blacklist him. Politicians who'd taken his donations would distance themselves. The veneer of respectability he'd fought for would crack, then shatter. But for the first time in years, Jiho wasn't making decisions based on what he could control. He was making them based on what he couldn't afford to lose, and he'd already lost too much. He thought of Naomi's face when he'd tried to handle her. Thought of Amina asking who he went home to. Thought of the warmth at that small table. The ordinary, impossible warmth he'd walked away from because staying felt too dangerous. Jiho picked up his phone again. Found Naomi's number. The one Dong-yun had discreetly obtained for security purposes. He typed, "I'm sorry," then deleted it. Typed, "Are you and Amina safe?" Deleted that too. What could he say that wouldn't sound like control dressed as concern? What words could repair the damage of treating her kindness like a liability? Jiho set down the phone. For the first time in his life, he chose restraint over action, silence over forcing outcomes. If Naomi wanted to reach him, she would. If she didn't, if she'd decided that waving at a lonely man in a tuxedo wasn't worth the complications he'd brought into her life, then that was her choice to make, not his to override. The change wasn't public. It wouldn't make headlines or shift power dynamics in visible ways, but it cost him something real, the illusion that he could protect people by controlling them. Jiho stood and walked to the window, watching the city lights blur into constellations. Somewhere out there, Naomi was tucking Amina into bed. Somewhere out there, Hyejin was planning her next move. Somewhere out there, Min-jae's death still demanded answers, and Jiho, for the first time since he'd become boss, had no plan. Just a quiet, terrifying commitment to become someone different than the man who'd let his brother die, asking questions alone. The knock on his door came so softly he almost missed it. Dong-hyun wouldn't knock like that. Neither would Kyung-ho. Jiho crossed the room and opened the door. Amina stood in the hallway, purple coat buttoned to her chin. braids tucked under a knitted hat. Her small hand clutched a folded piece of paper. Behind her, the hallway was empty. Jiho's heart stopped. Amina, where's Naomi? Grandma's downstairs, Amina said. She's waiting in the car. She doesn't know I came up. You shouldn't be here. I brought you something. Amina held out the paper. You left before I could give it to you. Jiho knelt, taking the paper with trembling hands. It was a drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands. On the left, a tall figure in black. In the middle, a small figure with braids. On the right, an older figure with curls. Above them, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, Family is who stays. Jiho stared at the drawing until his vision blurred. You're sad again, Amina observed. Your face is loud. Yeah, Jiho whispered. It is. Amina reached up and patted his cheek, gentle, certain. Grandma says when people are really, really sad, they forget they're not alone. So I'm reminding you. She turned and walked back toward the elevator, small and brave and carrying a truth Jiho couldn't ignore. He wasn't alone anymore, and that meant everything he did next, every choice, every consequence, would matter to people who'd offered him a seat when he had nowhere to belong. The elevator doors closed on Amina's small wave. Jiho stood in his empty penthouse, holding a child's drawing like a lifeline, and for the first time since Minjae died, he knew exactly what he had to do. Jiho found Amina sitting on the lobby bench of his building the next morning, legs swinging above the marble floor, that same purple coat buttoned to her chin. His driver had texted at 6 a.m., Sir, there's a child in the lobby asking for you. Jiho had thrown on clothes and taken the elevator down, heart hammering with scenarios he couldn't control. Now, seeing her small figure alone in the vast lobby, something in him cracked. Amina. He crossed the space in 3 strides. Where's Naomi? Getting coffee. Amina pointed toward the cafe across the street, visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. She thinks I'm in the bathroom. Jiho glanced at the cafe, then back at Amina. You snuck away? I needed to ask you something. Amina's face was serious, older than 7. Were you trying to protect us or protect yourself? The question landed like a blade between ribs. Jiho sat down beside her slowly, the lobby suddenly too bright, too exposed. What? When you wanted to send us away, Amina said. When you called the car and tried to make us leave. Were you scared for us? Or were you scared of caring about us? Jiho opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because the answer was both. And admitting it meant admitting what he'd spent years denying. That attachment terrified him more than any enemy ever could. I don't want you hurt, Jiho said finally. Either of you. That's not what I asked. Jiho looked at this child who saw through him with the kind of clarity that came from surviving loss too early. I'm scared, he admitted, of caring, of losing people I care about. Because of your brother, Amina said. Jiho's breath caught. How do you... Grandma told me. She said you have the kind of sad that comes from not getting to say goodbye. Amina's small hand found his. My mama died when I was little. I don't remember saying goodbye either. Jiho felt his throat tighten. I'm sorry. Me too. Amina squeezed his hand. But Grandma says we don't stop loving people just because loving them hurts. We just learn to carry it better. Your grandmother is very wise. She's also really mad at you. Jiho almost smiled. I know. Not because you wanted to protect us, Amina clarified. Because you treated her like she was fragile. Like she couldn't decide things for herself. She tilted her head. Are you going to do that again? No, Jiho said. And meant it. Amina studied him with the same intensity Naomi had shown at the gala, measuring, assessing, deciding if he was worth the trouble. Grandma says she won't accept a relationship where she's treated like cargo, Amina reported. She says if you want to be in our lives, you have to trust us to be strong enough to stand with you, not behind you. Jiho nodded slowly. Can I tell you something? The truth about that night? Amina nodded. So Jiho told her. About Minjae asking questions that got him killed. About Hyejin controlling access to legitimacy, like a key she could revoke. About the canceled reservation being a test of obedience. About how Naomi's wave had disrupted a power game he'd been losing without realizing it. Your grandmother offered me something I forgot existed, Ji-ho said quietly. A place to belong that wasn't transactional. And it terrified me because the last time I cared about someone, about Min-jae, he died. Amina listened with the seriousness of someone twice her age. When Ji-ho finished, she said, "So you pushed us away because you thought caring would get us killed." "Yes." "That's really sad," Amina said, "but it's also kind of selfish." Ji-ho blinked. "What?" "You decided for us," Amina explained. "You decided we couldn't handle danger. You decided we were better off without you, but you didn't ask what we wanted." The words hit harder than any of Hyejin's threats. "You're right," Ji-ho said. "I'm sorry." Amina swung her legs thoughtfully. "If you want a family table, you have to stop acting like a storm. Storms protect themselves by pushing everything away. Families protect each other by staying close." Ji-ho stared at this 7-year-old who'd just articulated what he'd spent years refusing to understand. "Can I talk to Naomi?" he asked. "Not to demand forgiveness, just to explain on her terms." Amina brightened. "You have to ask her yourself." She pulled a folded napkin from her pocket, the Armitage Ballroom logo visible on one corner. On it, Naomi had written an address in neat script. "That's where we live," Amina said. "Come by tonight, 6 o'clock. If you're late, Grandma says that tells her everything she needs to know about whether you're serious." Ji-ho took the napkin like it was made of glass. "I'll be there." Amina hopped down from the bench. "Good. And Ji-ho?" "Yes?" "Don't bring gifts. Don't bring money. Just bring yourself." She smiled. "The real one, not the boss one." She skipped toward the cafe, braids bouncing, leaving Ji-ho sitting in his building's lobby, holding a napkin and feeling like he'd just been given something infinitely more valuable than power. A second chance. 6 blocks away, in a restaurant Hyejin controlled, Seung-hoon set down his phone and looked across the table. "He pulled out," Seung-hoon said. "Every dollar, every account, clean break from the foundation." Hyejin's expression remained neutral, but her champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. "When?" "Last night." "Interesting." Hyejin set down her glass with deliberate precision. "And the woman, Naomi Brooks?" Seung-hoon slid a folder across the table. "Employment history, address, the granddaughter's school, everything." Hyejin opened the folder, scanning contents with clinical efficiency. "She works 3 jobs to support 1 child. No savings worth mentioning. No protection." "No protection," Seung-hoon confirmed. Hyejin smiled, the expression empty of warmth. "Then we apply pressure where it counts. Not to Ji-ho directly. He expects that. We go through her." "What kind of pressure?" "The kind that makes her choose between her safety and his proximity." Hyejin closed the folder. "Ji-ho thinks he can walk away from our game. He needs to learn that walking away just expands the playing field." Seung-hoon nodded. "When do we move?" Hyejin checked her watch. "Tonight. 6 o'clock should be perfect." She raised her glass in a toast to an empty room. And across the city, Ji-ho held a child's drawing and a napkin address, completely unaware that Hyejin had already made Naomi and Amina the pressure point again. Only this time, there would be no warning. Ji-ho arrived at Naomi's apartment building at 5:47 p.m., early enough to show respect, late enough to prove he wasn't performing urgency. He stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the modest brick structure in Brooklyn, and felt the weight of every choice that had led him here. No Dong-yun waiting in a black SUV, no Gyung-ho scanning rooftops, no empire insulating him from consequence, just Ji-ho, the real one. He was reaching for the intercom when a black sedan pulled up behind him, sleek, deliberate, wrong. Seung-hoon stepped out, followed by 2 men Ji-ho recognized from Foundation security. "Perfect timing," Seung-hoon said pleasantly. "We were hoping to catch you before you complicated things further." Ji-ho's spine went rigid. "This has nothing to do with you." "It has everything to do with us." Hyejin emerged from the sedan's back seat, immaculate in a charcoal coat. "You pulled your money. You broke our agreement. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences?" "I'm done playing your game." "Games don't end because one player walks away," Hyejin said. "They just change rules." She nodded toward Naomi's building. "She works at 3 locations, a hotel, a catering company, a dry cleaner. One word from me, and she loses all three. The granddaughter attends public school on a scholarship. That can be revoked. Their lease? Month to month. Easily terminated. Jiho felt rage crystallize into something cold and focused. You threaten them, and I will. You'll what? Hyejin smiled. Destroy me? With what evidence? Your brother tried that. We both know how it ended. The words landed like a blade. Jiho's hands curled into fists, every instinct screaming to end this the way he'd ended other threats. Swiftly, violently, permanently. But Amina's voice echoed in his mind. If you want a family table, you have to stop acting like a storm. I'm not Minjae, Jiho said quietly, and this isn't a negotiation. Then what is it? Xinghoon asked. A choice. Jiho pulled out his phone, opened a voice recording app, hit play. Hyejin's voice filled the street. Minjae's accident wasn't an accident. It was a message. He was asking questions about foundation money. No, I protected the foundation. Minjae was collateral damage. Hyejin's expression fractured, just for a second, before smoothing back into control. That proves nothing. It proves enough. Jiho stopped the recording. I sent copies to 3 journalists, 2 federal investigators, and a lawyer with instructions to release everything if anything happens to me, Naomi, or Amina. You wanted leverage? Now we both have it. You're bluffing, Sunghoon said. Try me. The standoff stretched taut as wire. Then Naomi's voice cut through from above. Y'all planning to have this conversation on my stoop all night? Jiho looked up. Naomi stood in her 3rd-floor window, Amina beside her, both watching with expressions that said they'd seen this kind of standoff before and weren't impressed. We're leaving, Hyejin said coldly to Jiho. But this isn't over. Yes, Jiho said. It is. Hyejin studied him for a long moment, measuring, calculating, recognizing something new in his stance. Not the man she'd controlled, not the boss who needed her doors open, someone else entirely. She returned to her sedan without another word. Xinghoon followed, and the car pulled away, leaving Jiho alone on the Brooklyn sidewalk with his heart hammering and his hands shaking. The intercom buzzed. Naomi's voice crackled through. 3rd floor, doors open. Jiho climbed 3 flights of worn stairs, each step feeling like crossing a border into territory he'd never learned to navigate. Naomi's apartment was small. Kitchen visible from the living room, mismatched furniture, children's drawings taped to walls, warm, lived in, real. Amina sat at a small table doing homework, crayon moving across paper with intense focus. Naomi stood near the stove, stirring something that smelled like home. You're early, Naomi observed. I didn't want to be late. Smart man. Naomi didn't turn around. I heard what you said down there, about recordings, about leverage. Jiho's throat tightened. I meant it. Nobody touches you or Amina, ever. I believe you. Naomi finally turned, wooden spoon still in hand. But I need you to understand something. I don't need you to fight my battles. I need you to trust that I can stand in my own fights. I do trust you. Then prove it. Naomi set down the spoon. Stop treating me like a problem to solve. Stop using power moves to protect me from choices I'm allowed to make. Jiho felt the truth of it settle in his chest. You're right. I'm sorry. Naomi studied him for a long moment. Then, sit down. Dinner's almost ready. Jiho sat at the small table across from Amina, who looked up from her homework and smiled. You came, Amina said. I promised. And you didn't bring gifts? Just myself. Good. Amina returned to her drawing, another stick figure family, this one with 4 people instead of 3. Naomi brought plates to the table, nothing fancy, just chicken, rice, vegetables. The kind of meal that nourished more than bodies. They ate in comfortable silence, punctuated by Amina's chatter about school and Naomi's gentle corrections about elbows on tables. Jiho watched them exist together, this small, imperfect, beautiful life, and felt something unlock inside him. He wasn't here to protect them from his world. He was here to learn how to exist in theirs. Thank you, Jiho said quietly, for letting me sit here. Naomi met his eyes across the small table. You don't need permission to belong, Jiho. You just need to show up, really show up. Not as boss, not as protector, just as yourself. I don't know if I remember how to be just myself. Then learn. Naomi's voice was firm but kind. We'll help. Amina reached across the table and patted his hand. That same gesture from New Year's Eve, grounding and certain. Family is who stays, Amina reminded him. You're staying, right? Jiho looked at this child who'd drawn him into a picture before he'd earned the right to be there. Looked at Naomi, who'd waved at a stranger and changed everything. Yeah, Jiho said, voice rough with emotion. I'm staying. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos. Sirens, traffic, lives intersecting and diverging. But at this small table in Brooklyn, Jiho Park sat without fear, without armor, without needing to control the outcome. Naomi's hand reached across the table, not to wave this time, but to rest beside his. An invitation, not a rescue. And for the first time since Minjae died, Jiho understood what belonging actually meant. Not a velvet rope, not a reservation, not a table someone granted him permission to occupy, just showing up, being real, being seen. He didn't need an empire to matter. He just needed to be here.